It is, thank you. It is 5:01 and I will call to order the February 8th meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission and start off with the script for remotely conducted open meetings. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. Public from the meeting who does not use a full name or acts inappropriately. As a preliminary matter, this is Arthur Gasparo, Nantucket Airport Commission Chairman. Permit me to confirm all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Buscarin?
Here.
Ms. Planzer?
Here.
And I don't see any other, there are the commissioners. I'll come back to that. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Rafter?
Here.
Mr. Carberg?
Here.
Ms. Perales?
Here.
Ms. Stoikova-Nelson?
Here.
Ms. Sansbury?
Here.
And anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Lasden?
Here.
Ms. Nugent?
Here.
Mr. Sukup?
Here.
And Ms. Kamer?
Here.
Thank you. We will also be joined at some point by Dave Mackey and Christina Marshall of Anderson and Krieger, who will be with the commission for the executive session, which follows the open meeting. Good evening. The open meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission is being conducted remotely pursuant to the Chapter 20 Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the commission is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. The meeting will be aired at a later time on the Town of Nantucket YouTube channel. Please note the meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware other folks may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We're now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda after they conclude their remarks. I'll go down the line of members, inviting each name by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait till I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After members have spoken, I will forward public comments to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names, be acknowledged by, and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And with that, we will move on to the first item on the agenda. I still don't see Mr. Marks or Ms. Topham, but we'll proceed. As stated, probably about 4 times, the meeting's being both audio and video recorded. And I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda unless there are any questions, comments, or concerns.
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion been made and seconded by roll call vote. Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We have the draft minutes of January 11th. Is there a motion to approve or any comments?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Right, motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And then we have the January 19th and February 2nd warrants for review and ratification.
Move to approve those warrants.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Is there any public comment for items which are not otherwise on the agenda? Please raise your virtual hand or speak up. Seeing none, we'll move on to pending leases and contracts as set forth on Exhibit 1 and turn it over to Mr. Rafter. And welcome, Mr. Marks. We're just getting through the formalities and getting to leases and contracts.
Sorry, I'm late. Apologize.
No worries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first two items on the exhibit are catering license agreements. One is with Taste of Nantucket and the other is Island Kitchen. That's for catering of aircraft. Next is a contract with Aero Specialties Incorporated for $110,782. That's for for 2 tugs, purchase of 2 tugs. Then we have a contract amendment with CHA Consulting for $22,289, and that is for the commissioning associated with the fuel farm rehabilitation. We have a contract with McFarland Johnson for $22,600. That is a task order to review and research right-of-way and property boundaries. And we have a contract with Potters for Potters Industry LLC, $284,600. That's our annual supply and delivery of glass beads that we need for the markings on the airfield. And the last is a contract amendment with Track Builders for $272,298.86. That's a change order for the fuel farm rehabilitation project, which will include a number of things. There's some work in the pump house that had to be done to meet the seismic standards. It's quite expensive, about $147,000 worth of work for a rack to support the fire suppression system in there. There's some additional grounding of skids for $15,000, a welded gate that will match the rest of our system for about $11,000. There's a credit of about $23,000, and we're looking to convert an avgas tank from avgas to jet fuel. That'll cost about $121,000, and that'll give us an additional 20,000 gallons of fuel storage for Jet A. That's the contracts.
Thank you, Mr. Rafter. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Rafter on the proposed leases and contracts? I would just say thank you for getting those together, especially the fuel one, so that we can, I know there's a little bit of a scramble. I know there's some effort that went into that, and I really think that's something that, because it's happening on such a timely basis, could really help us heading into the season. So thank you. Is there a motion to approve the leases and contracts as set forth on Exhibit 1?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you. Moving on to pending matters. Mr. Rafter, the capital approval process home rule petition.
There's been no change in that. We have not heard back yet, and we'll ping them again for the status update before the next meeting.
Thank you. And PFAS investigation update. I'll turn it over to either you, Mr. Rafter, or our team.
Well, we'll turn it over to consultants. Rich, I don't know if you want to start off or what, but it's an update on our PFAS program.
No, I think I would just turn it over to Jim from Weston.
Good evening. I'm going to share my screen. And you should now be able to see the slides.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. So what we want to do is give you an update since our last commission meeting presentation with regard to the ongoing work at the airport related to the PFAS investigation. So we'll jump into that. These are the 4 components of the work we've performed over the last few months. There's ongoing O&M of the POET systems and private well sampling. That work is being conducted under our IRA plan with Mass DEP. We conducted some soil sampling on Monahans Road in association with the ongoing installation of the water line. We'll talk about that. And the majority of the work was focused on groundwater sampling at the airport in an effort to, on the airport property, in an effort to define the extent of the contamination on the airport property. So we'll be talking about those. With regards to the POET and water supply sampling, Again, that work is conducted in accordance with our IRA plan. This is the tracking table that we use. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's in your packet, unless people have questions. Just a couple of numbers that I do want to call your attention to. First, we passed a milestone this past period where we've collected over 500 samples now of water supply samples, and we've sampled a total of 77 residents. The other thing I want to call your attention to is at the bottom here, we've added a new line connected to town water. So as the water line is being installed, we are activated and disinfected, working with Comet. We are connecting residences as we go. So we've connected up 8 residents in the Nobodere Way area. And we say Nobodere Way area, that includes several streets. There was actually 4 homes on Evergreen, 2 on Nobodere, 1 on Airport, and 1 on Daffodil. So in that vicinity. So those homes are now connected. They're being provided with water from Comet. And we are working with the airport to and those homeowners to begin the cessation of providing bottled water in that area. So that'll be ongoing. With that, we'll turn to the sampling work that was done. As I mentioned, we had conducted some soil sampling in support of the water line installation. So what you're looking at here, this is the corner of the South Ramp at J. This is Monahanset Road here. The access gate is here. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that. So the initial plan for the water line was to run the water line down Monahanset in this direction, coming down from Nobodere and Evergreen. And it was going to transition onto airport property through this gate and then go down this way on airport property down to where it's going to hook up to MVR, the residences down there. During a site inspection prior to this work, I noticed that this area receives some runoff and actually pools along right down kind of where the gate is, pools along the side of Monahanset Road. And there was a concern that this water that could be runoff from this ramp area that's getting down into this area, and that runoff could contain PFAS. So there was some concern that there may be PFAS in the soils here that would impact the installation of the water line, that they would have to deal with handling impacted soils with PFAS. So we designed and implemented a soil sampling program. We're targeting soils in the upper 4 feet, which was the depth at which the water line construction was going to occur. We did 1 sample basically right at the outfall of the where the gate is, right where this runoff would impact the road area. And then we went 1 to the south, and then we went up in this direction. The reason we went in more to the north was because, again, the water line's coming down here, and that was kind of the focus of this investigation, and then cutting through here. So our conceptual model here was that, if we are getting runoff that is containing PFAS, it would pool in this area. It is a low spot on Monahanset. If you drive through this area, cars driving through in either direction could spread that water and contain the PFAS up and down this slope, which is why we collect our soil samples in both directions. The results, as you can see here, consistent with what the nomenclature we've used in the past. So yellow means that PFAS was detected, but below the MCP standards. Red means it was detected, but above the MCP standards. And the standards that we're using at this location are the conservative, very low S1 GW1 soil standards. So these are the lowest soil standards there are. And the reason that those apply is because we are outside the airport property. So in comparing it to that, you can see that we did have some exceedances, these red samples here. I will make note that for the most part, the contamination was shallow, only in the upper 0 to 1 foot, which is what you would expect from a release that was basically from runoff that's being kind of spread by vehicle traffic in either direction. You expect it to be shallow. So that's kind of what we're seeing. As a result of these, and you can see that the contamination did extend, soil contamination did extend up a ways. So as a result of this, the decision was made to reroute the water line and cross onto airport property up in this area, and then go in through this area on the airport property. And that avoids disturbing the PFAS soil contamination in this area. Certainly further work is going to be required. We're going to have to collect more samples to define the extent of this and evaluate any remedial actions if necessary. But that's further down the line. The immediate focus of this, again, was to get the water line installed. So the second part of our field investigation during this time period was, and really for the most part, was on groundwater within the airport footprint. At our previous commission meeting, one of the concerns brought up by the commissioners was groundwater flow and how good of an understanding we had of the groundwater flow conditions on the airport property. Realizing that we had kind of limited points that we could use to measure groundwater elevations that we used to construct our groundwater contour maps. And certainly our understanding of groundwater flow is critical to this overall investigation, because that's guiding where we're looking for contamination. So as part of this most recent investigation, we installed we did two things. We did groundwater grab sampling. So we would go in with a drill rig and just collect a sample of the groundwater and analyze that for PFAS. But from those groundwater grab samples, you can't get groundwater elevations. So we also installed temporary well points at several locations, a number of locations as well. And that allowed us to get not only a groundwater sample, but also a groundwater elevation. So we had those surveyed, we measured the groundwater elevations, and then we were able to plot those here. So what you're seeing here in the dark blue, these numbers are all groundwater elevations that we measured across the site. And you can see we have much better coverage now across the airport. And this represents a combination not only of these temporary well points that we installed, but also the existing monitoring wells that were at the site. So we supplemented the existing network. We did a comprehensive round of all the points, comprehensive water level measurement round of all the points, and plotted it up. And as you can see, so these groundwater contours reflect that more detailed understanding of the groundwater flow. And you can see it's consistent with what we've shown before. So again, that gives us good high level of confidence that decisions that we've made previously with regard to where we were sampling, especially in the off-airport areas, the residential areas along MVR and to the west, that those decisions were founded on good science, that we've got a good handle on the groundwater flow. As I said, the second part, or the second portion of, or second phase of that investigation, was the groundwater sampling. And again, that's a combination of these temporary wells that we installed. We collected samples from those. We also collected samples from these, we analyzed the samples from the groundwater grab sampling points. And also we sampled the existing monitoring wells on the site to give us a comprehensive round of groundwater quality data for PFAS. And what you're looking at here, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and we'll zoom in and look at specific areas. So what you're looking at here is basically the results of that groundwater testing investigation. And so the areas where there's no color, PFAS was not detected. The areas where it's yellow, PFAS was detected, but it was below the GW1 MCP groundwater standards, so below the drinking water standards. Areas where it's red, it exceeded the standard of 20 part per trillion. And areas where it is purple, it exceeded 10 times. So it exceeded 200 part per trillion in areas where it's purple. So purple is the highest concentration, red exceeds, yellow is it's detected, but it doesn't exceed. So if you kind of take a step back, what you can see is that we've got several plumes here where we've got contaminated groundwater containing PFAS above the standards. So let's take a zoom in here and take a little closer look. And we'll start on the east side and kind of work our way to the west side. So what we're seeing here, and we were glad to see that the data that we were collecting was aligning with our groundwater flow interpretation, and also with what we're seeing in the residential wells along MVR. So we've got a plume, a groundwater area of groundwater contamination, groundwater plume that originates in this location. We know that these homes here were impacted. We put in a transect or a line of groundwater sampling points along here, and we detected it there. And we've traced that up to the area around the end of runway 33 and the run-up area for runway 33. We don't have any documented or known applications of AFFF in this area. So this was a little surprising, but it does seem to be pointing to this location. We've got a clean sample here. We've got clean samples here and here. So we believe that it may be coming from some historical unknown applications of AFFF. These areas, you'll see that there are question marks in some areas. These are areas where we're going to be focusing additional work here in the spring. So we need to collect some more groundwater grab samples in this area to try and home in on where this is coming from. Next up, we've got a plume that's emanating from this area, which is the kind of a combination of the Stroney lot and the runway 15, runway 33 midpoint. These are known areas of AFFF application. So this is not a surprise. And those line up again with homes on MVR where we had exceedances as well. So, these data seem to be aligning. We are again planning some additional work this spring because we don't have this bounded to the north. So we do intend to grab some additional groundwater samples in here to confirm that this is actually from the Stroney lot and or from 1533 mid. So we'll do some more work up in that area. Kind of still working our way west here. Sand pit, is an area of AFFF application. Based on our records, it was actually one of the areas that had received a higher amount of applications. So we expected contamination there, and we're not finding it for whatever reason. There doesn't seem to be any groundwater contamination associated with the sand pit area. So that's good news. Again, continuing to work west, we see a plume, large plume here, very wide, very high concentrations. Flowing through this area. This has been traced back, and it seems to align with the south ramp at B, which is again a known area of application, training applications. Fire stations up in here, and we also have the fuel farm, which again we know was the fuel farm fire suppression system is tested. That water accumulates in the containment area around those facilities, the truck rack and the tank farm, and that water historically had been discharged to a drainage sump in that area. So we know that was, and that process that procedure has since been modified, and that water is now treated before it's discharged. So that's no longer a release, but the historical contamination is maintaining this plume. Runway 6 run up, there is a small bump there. There's some contamination associated with that, but it seems like the majority of the higher concentrations are coming from fuel farm, south ramp at J. You see some localized contamination in groundwater associated with south ramp at J. This is kind of that vicinity of where that gate was, where we talked about for the soil sampling associated with the water line. That area, there is some groundwater contamination there, not as high as it is coming from the fuel farm or the south ramp. But again, that all moves down, stays on airport property and discharges to the Atlantic Ocean, impacting the residents here on the west end of MBR. The west side. So, this has certainly been our most difficult area to evaluate. There's a lot of things going on here. Based on the information that we've collected to date, we know that we've got the car wash in this area, the airport gas and car wash, and the use of wax products associated with that can be a source of PFAS. We've tested at that facility. We know that there is some contribution of PFAS from that facility. We also did some sampling up in Statue Park, and we did find contamination extending up the west side of Statue Park. We've recently got some data from the UMass sampling program that's ongoing, and they did identify some additional contamination up gradient from that. So there does appear to be some offsite contamination up in this area to the north of the airport that is migrating onto the airport property and through this area, and then down through the Nobodere Way, Evergreen Way neighborhood. So again, it's complex in here. There's a lot going on, a lot of different sources, and we're continuing to evaluate that. But we have documented that there is a upgradient source that is contributing as well. And finally, there's a location or an area of groundwater contamination up on the north end of the airport. We are still looking into this. We don't have any, again, known applications or use of storage of AFFF up in this area. The high point seems to be associated with a Quonset hut building that's in this area that is used to store off-season landscaping equipment. So in the wintertime, they store the mowing equipment. In the summertime, they store the plows. But there does seem to be some PFAS contamination associated with that. It does seem to be a fairly small plume. It doesn't go very far. It's very narrow. We don't have the upgradient extent yet identified. There's nothing upgradient from there. It's all undeveloped. So it does appear to be somehow related to this area. So we're going to be doing some more work up there to try and figure out what's going on there. So that is the kind of summary of the results of our investigation. We did include in your packet these individual maps. These maps are basically just provide the data that we use to draw those colored contours and draw the plumes. So if there is a question about a specific data point, you want to go back and look, you have that information. So and it's broken up into the 3 different portions of the airport so that the figures will be legible. So so there's 3 of these that you'll see in your packet. We're just going to scroll through them. I do want to just touch briefly on the Mcb timeline and kind of where we are, just to kind of baseline everyone. So the initial discovery of PFAS occurred on March 3rd, 2020, when it was reported to Mass DEP. Within the first year, we were focused on preliminary response actions, identifying homes that were impacted and getting those people on bottled water or POET systems hooked up to mitigate those risks. We also completed the phase 1 that had to be completed within the first year. After that, this is where we are currently. We're in the blue area, so we're doing our comprehensive response actions, which include the phase 2 comprehensive site investigation. That's where we have to define the source, nature, and extent of the contamination in soil and groundwater. So that's where we are now. We're in the process. We've got a 3-year period to complete that. And that has to be completed by March 3rd, 2024. And like I said, that's ongoing. Once that work is completed and we've defined the extent of the contamination and conducted our risk assessment, then we will remediate or evaluate remedial options and kind of figure out what needs to be done. So this is where we are currently. So next steps, we are planning a limited spring mobilization. Traditionally, the way we've been investigating the site is doing our field investigations in spring and fall. So we're doing it in the off season, so we're not impacting airport operations. Our fall rounds tend to be larger. We've got a little more time there, and it gives us more time to evaluate the data that we get. So our fall investigations are generally larger, like the one that I just reported to you, all the work that we did there. You see that was fairly extensive. Our spring ones are generally smaller, and we'll just kind of do some investigations that are kind of focusing on some obvious questions and some I call the low-hanging fruit that we use to inform our site understanding and as we plan for the larger fall. So we are planning one for spring 2020. Again, it should be fairly limited. We are going to be targeting again the Stroning lot and that runway 1533 mid area that I mentioned, where we had some questions there. Also the east end of runway 33 to try and figure out where that plume originates up in that area. And then the north end as well, that narrow plume up the north end. And we may not have time or budget to be able to complete all of these, but these are kind of on our list at this point. And then also some deeper samples. What we were looking at was, for the most part, contamination that's in the shallow aquifer, the shallow portion of the aquifer, so the top of the aquifer. We have done some deeper samples. We've done 2 as part of that last round, and it looks like the contamination stays pretty consistent with depths. So one of our requirements under the MCP is we do have to define the vertical extent, so we have to find in quotes the bottom of the contamination. So if we have time and budget, we would like to get some deeper samples to figure out how deep the stuff does extend. Second, we're also going to be working on again developing the radar plots and looking at that west side, trying to sort out what's going on that west side and where the source of that contamination is. whether it's an airport source or an off-airport source, and figure that out. Western Solutions has hired a PFAS expert, Dr. Nasim Pika. She's nationally known and has a doctorate in PFAS, and specifically the modification of PFAS as it moves down flow paths. So we're going to be getting her involved, and she'll using her expertise, leveraging her expertise to help us sort that out. We're going to be downloading transducers. I didn't mention, but we installed transducers in a number of those temporary monitoring points and existing monitoring wells that are on the site. And the reason for that is we want to look at water level fluctuations on the airport over time to evaluate potential impacts from residential pumping nearby, and also tidal influences and response to precipitation events. So we're going to be downloading that and taking a look at the long-term groundwater elevation changes over time. And then again, we'll be getting the data coming in from our spring round. We'll pull all that together and develop a plan for the fall mobilization and figure out what that's going to look like. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Sukup. Do any commissioners have any questions related to the presentation? I can only see part at a time, so I'm gonna have to just speak up. Okay, I have one, and I was hoping that maybe just for the sake of the public, that you might be able to clarify the distinction between the thresholds for on the airport property and off the airport property. And when you said the off site is held to the highest standard, just to confirm that in fact means actually the lowest concentration.
Correct, it does. Yeah,
right.
So let me go to so look at this map. So yeah, the distinction between airport property. So the airport property here is shown in green, and it's a fairly complex issue. But the airport, for the most part, most of the airport property is within what's called a potentially productive aquifer exclusion zone, which means that the water within the airport is not used for drinking water standards. So even though it's in a potentially productive aquifer, which is an island aquifer, because no one is drinking that water, it is not necessarily held to drinking water standards. However, once you get off airport property, that doesn't hold. So there you're held to the more stringent drinking water standards. And that also applies not only to the groundwater sample, the groundwater standards, but also soil standards. So the soil standards for on the airport property are the ones that apply there under the MCP are higher levels than offsite.
Thank you. And so just to put a finer point on it, the samples that are in red off from the soil sampling offsite may not have been in red if they were on airport property.
Correct, 100%. These samples, if they were compared to the soil standards that apply on the property, these would be considered not contaminated.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
And I think that you did a great job covering the material and the next steps and the timeline, but it's a pretty wide timeline over the sort of the 3 years. And you mentioned the fall, the larger mobilization, but that is happening for this season, correct? This fall.
Correct. Yeah. Well, yeah, we're not sure what that's going to look like at this point, but the issue here that we have, for the airport is because, A, we're on Nantucket, so getting a drill rig out there is no easy task. And B, with the seasonal operation of the airport, we're limited in when we can do work. So it's difficult to do work in the midwinter just because of weather conditions, and we can't work in the summer because of the airport operation. So we're really limited to being able to work in the spring and in the fall. And when you look at the timeline, it sounds like we've got a lot of time. If we're essentially we're in March of 2022 now, we've got 2 years to get to the end point here. It sounds like a lot of time. really, when you look at it, you really have 4 more mobilizations that we can do. We can do, right, spring and fall 2022, and then spring and fall 2023. So basically, we have to make sure that we're completed and we've met the requirements of the MCP by that fall of 2023 mobilization. And if we knew exactly what was needed to get to that, that would be easy, because we could say, okay, if we need 20 more wells, okay, we need 20. We know that we need 20 more wells. We can just divide that up into divide it by 4 and do 5 wells each time. The problem is we don't know. The investigation is iterative, so we don't know what we need until we collect the next set of data. Just as the example I gave is when we were looking at the groundwater plumes, we identified, okay, we tracked it to this area, but we don't know what's going on over here. So we have to collect more samples. If these samples come back and they're contaminated, then we need to keep going in that direction until we trace back to wherever this contamination is coming from. So because you don't know the answer, you don't know how many more iterations of investigation you have to do. So that's why we're trying to get as much done as we can now, with the hope that we can finish this long before March 2024.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions or follow-up on any of the PFAS work?
No.
I will open it to the public for any questions or concerns. You can raise your virtual hand. I have the participant list open. I'm seeing none. So we'll look for the next status update interim report and go from there and keep going. It sounds like staff, Mr. Rafter or Mr. Carberg, anything further that you'd like to add?
No, I think Jim and his team have done a great job and making a lot of progress. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for your efforts. And as we mentioned earlier, no need to stick around unless you would like to.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the minimum standards update. This followed the discussion that we had at the last meeting to remove the minimum office space counter requirement for airlines. And I'll turn that over to Mr. Rafter that probably summarizes it.
That's exactly correct. It was requested by the airlines, and in some cases we are unable to provide the minimum requirement, so we're modifying or eliminating that. So we just request approval of the change to the minimum standards.
Any questions from anyone? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. Next, we have the revisions to the credit card processing requirements policy, or is it actually a new policy?
I believe it's a new policy, and we're looking to formalize this directive to employees to ensure the security of our credit card processing and the integrity of the system. So we had issued it initially as a directive to take immediate action when we discovered a potential opening in our security. So we closed that gap as soon as possible. We'd like to formalize it with a policy.
Thank you. Welcome, Commissioner Topham. Ms. Topham.
Hi there, Howie.
Great.
Hi.
We are just discussing the item 7 on the agenda.
I have to get a packet, so I'm in limbo.
Okay, well, you could choose to vote on this or not, depending on how you feel. This is the updated credit card processing requirement policy to improve security measures. Any further questions? If not, is there a motion to adopt the policy as drafted?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. And we'll turn it over to for item 8, which is finance. Mr. Rafter or Ms. Sansbury.
Yeah, just so the commission's aware, I presented our budget to the Finance Committee on February 1st last week. There are minimal questions, but apparently there's some discussion afterwards about some concerns that Capcom may have with our housing, and we've worked with the finance department on that. We're continuing to monitor it. The financial statement and audit is still pending. On the fuel revolver cap, we are in the process of requesting increase to the cap on the fuel farm revolver up to $6.5 million. That will allow us sufficient funds to purchase fuel, as well as address the change orders associated with the fuel farm project that were above or discussed earlier in the meeting, converting the avgas tank to Jet A. And again, it's reflective of some of the increase in the prices of fuel. So any questions before I move on the finance?
Nope, sounds good.
Okay. On the projects, Taxi Echo, we had meetings last. Yes.
Tom, sorry, it's Jamie. Don't we need a motion to
Oh.
approve the cap?
Yes, I apologize. You're right. To increase the fuel revolver cap up to $6.5 million, we do need a motion.
Any questions on the proposal? Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
So the motion's been made and seconded to increase the fuel revolver cap to $6.5 million. Any further discussion? Hearing none, how do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sansbury.
Yes, thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome.
Again, on projects, Taxiway Echo, we had some meetings last week with the contractor and engineers to discuss some change orders to the project, which would include decommissioning of 1230 and spot zero markings, and also the restart of the project. Contractors looking to be back here by March, and the decommissioning probably begin in April. Security phase 2, contractor was out just yesterday and cleaning up some punch list items. They've installed 2 of the 3 sets of doors. They'll be back later this month to finalize that. The fuel farm project is moving along very well. The skids have arrived and are set in place. We anticipate commissioning to take place the week of February 28th or sooner for fuel, and shortly thereafter for the fire suppression system. As mentioned earlier, we're working to have an avgas tank converted to Jet A, which will give us additional capacity. Another 20,000 gallons storage for Jet A. The crew quarters housing project, there were some, as I mentioned, questions from Capital Committee, and working through those. We'll be moving forward shortly to engage the OPM and begin development of the RFQ for the architect. Hangar development, Hagedorn Aviation construction has begun. However, they uncovered a primary electrical cable, and that will need to be rerouted by National Grid. There's a terminal optimization project, and the McFarland team has scheduled a charrette for February 18th. And I'd like to ask the chair and commission to identify 2 members of the commission to attend that. Hopefully the members of the long range planning subcommittee. And again, and I'll try to explain what this is about. I may need Rich's help, but this is looking at long range, what the terminal needs to be, what functional areas need to be addressed that may be inadequate, and how we want to proceed with that. As I mentioned before, there's quite a bit of money coming out of Washington specifically for terminals. So we want to gear up and look at some alternatives for what that may be. So it's probably going to be I would say maybe a 2 to 3 hour session. And I think it's critical that we get input early from the commissioners or the commission. So if the chair could recommend, or if somebody can volunteer, we'd like at least one and possibly two commissioners to join us.
Thanks, Mr. Rafter. Did you have a chance, or does somebody have the long range committee members? We just haven't looked at those in a little while. I knew we had the assignments somewhere. I thought it might have been myself and Ms. Planzer, but I just wanted to confirm that.
It is Mr. Gospero, Ms. Planzer, and Mr. Marks.
So the only reason I say two is we don't want to make it a public meeting. So
I'm happy to do it, but I'll also defer if either of you felt strongly about it and wanted to go. Mr. Marks,
I'm happy if you want to go. I'm fine.
You want to go or don't want to go?
If you'd like to go, that's fine. That's what I said.
Okay, sorry, there's a little echo. Okay, so and Ms. Planzer, you'd like to go?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll do that and we'll report back to the commission.
And if somebody gets hung up and they need to alternate, I'm happy to go.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
thank you very much. One last project, the water main project and water connections. As you heard in the PFAS presentation, they've made 8 connections so far. The water main itself, work is completed across the airport. They're working now out on Maddox-Sham Valley Road, and this week they converted to day work based on some feedback from community and others. So they're working daytime out in Maddox-Sham Valley Road, and hopefully that work will be done within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So that's great news, and we'll start getting people hooked up to water out in Maddox-Sham Valley area too. On the RFP bids, the maintenance contract for the security system, we're working with MJ on that. We provided them with our comments back on what we believe to be the necessary inventory of equipment, suggested levels, as well as the preventative maintenance scheduling. We have an RFQ for the OPM for the terminal optimization. We selected CHA as that for the OPM. We're negotiating a contract with them. The HVAC terminal project, a gift that keeps on giving. Stantec has reached out to the contractor that was selected for the public safety building and has received a proposal from them. This was done after consulting with legal and the chief procurement officer. But now we have some challenges financially, and we're going to try to work through those to see if there's any possibility of getting this work completed. As you know, we've been at this now for about 2 years. We've bid it, I think, 4 times and really haven't had any success. So we're hoping that we can work this one out. And the OPM on the housing project, we received 1 proposal that's being reviewed. Hold room concession space RFP is available to the public. Deadline is March 7th. On-call airfield electrical bid is being developed, as well as the on-call HVAC oil geothermal bid. On the operations side, we are working through some concerns related to the LEO staffing with the Nantucket Police Department. And last week we had the first snowstorm, I think it was last week, 2 weeks ago, of the season. Our crew did a tremendous job at getting the airport open in a timely manner. You may have heard some stories that we were not open, but we were open Sunday morning by 11 a.m. and had traffic Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So again, great job by everyone. It was a pretty big storm, and operations, maintenance, all department, security, everybody kicked in. So it was great. Security, again, I don't want to go through the details, but they're in your packet. Things are going well. I'll go through the fuel statistics. Jet A gallons sold for December were up 33, almost 34%. Year to date, up 42%. For January, they're down 34%. Avgas is up 12.5% for December, and almost 17% year to date. And in January, they're down 25%. And freight for December was down about 12% over last December and up 13 to 14% over last year. And on the personnel side of things, I'm pleased to announce that Gary Allen has been promoted to the maintenance supervisor, and Shanroy Nelson is transferring from the operations department into maintenance. We've also brought on 2 new employees into the operations department, and we'd like to welcome aboard Junior Brown and Joanna Rodriguez, both who were seasonal employees previously and have accepted full-time employment. So that's good news. We're starting to backfill some of those positions, but when we move people around from inside, that just opens up some more. So we're going to continue trying to backfill all the positions. And that's the end of my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rafter. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments on Mr. Rafter's report?
No.
An awful lot going on for this time of year, so.
Yeah, for the slow season.
We have a travel request for the annual AAAE conference, June 5th to 8th. It was included in your packet.
Oh, yeah, I apologize. I forgot.
Oh, that's okay. That's for you, Mr. Rafter?
Yeah, just a note for what it's worth. That is in my contract.
Right.
And I'm still evaluating, quite frankly, because it's very expensive. So I'm going to either shorten it or not go at all. But I'll try to minimize the impact financially.
Does anyone have any concerns with Mr. Rafter's travel request? Okay. And moving on to commissioners' comments. Any commissioners have any comments for either future agenda items or matters not anticipated 48 hours before the meeting? Hearing none, we would move on one more time to public comment. Is there any members of the public have any comments? Please raise your virtual hand. I don't see anyone raising their hand. And so I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session per general law, chapter 30A, section 21A, to review the executive session minutes enumerated on the agenda for possible release, to review the minutes of December 14th and January 11th for review and possible release. For clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining where the chair has determined an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the airport commission. And clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Walsh where the chair has determined an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the airport commission not to return to open session. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, how do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you all very much. Welcome, Mr. Mackey.
Good evening. And I think I'm expecting Ms.